Hey all my fellow and soon-to-be maniacs out there, welcome back to this beautiful channel, and this is the first video of the year, so congrats on that. And I think by this time we have already hit 250 subs, so thank you guys for that. So today I'm going to be taking you through my Blender process for how I create my webcomics, and specifically we're going to be focusing more on how I set up my files for my webcomics. So hopefully if you're looking forward to using Blender, and I mean only Blender, for your webcomic creation process, there is a way to do so, and I'm about to show you exactly my Blender process for creating webcomics. So in this video we're going to specifically be looking at the setup. I'm not going to be going into any like crazy detailed stuff that we might just do in another video, but for now just getting your setup done and showing you how you can use your setup might give you an idea of how to customize to best fit your drawing style as well as your webcomic creation process. So for now let's just focus on the basics and the setup so we can just get an idea of how we're going to put everything together for our webcomic. Now for those of you who don't know, I've been working on a new webcomic called The City of Clones, which will be dropping in the beginning of February, I think February 6th to be exact. And with that comic I am only using Blender to create it, which means putting it together all together in Blender, whether it be the panel setup, whether it be creating the panels itself, everything will be done in Blender. Obviously there's a lot of drawbacks to only using Blender for this. I would always recommend combining using Blender with other drawing softwares, but for now let's just focus on only using Blender for those of you who can only use Blender. And also this process helps you a lot in optimizing your work, so that if you don't really have a beefy PC, like a really good PC, this might work for you as well, because you are going to be rendering out all your panels, and of course you don't want it to take a long time. Found a way to kind of optimize mostly everything. Obviously if you still want a fast and speedy process as well as efficient process, you're gonna need a good PC, but sometimes just having a decent PC can also work as well. I always recommend working with what you have and doing the best you can. So I will be working on a full-on walkthrough with my Blender and webcomic process, so if you guys want to stay tuned and check that out, I suggest you hit up a like on this video and subscribe, and ring that notification bell to stay notified of any other content that I plan on releasing on this channel. To start our process, here we're starting in a new Blender scene. As you can see, there's nothing in here, no camera, no nothing, just an empty collection on the side. But normally when you start up Blender, you will have your default cube and camera setup. I would recommend just deleting all of that, and there is a way you can actually set up a startup file so that as a default, so that whenever you open Blender it will always just go to that startup file. But I'm not going to be showing you all the Blender basics in this video as well. I'm taking into account that you kind of have a basic understanding of how to use Blender, and if not, there's plenty of other channels and plenty of other videos out there that will help you get through those basics of Blender. And I would recommend actually first learning how to use Blender, the ins and outs and all the basics, and then get back to this video. So first of all, we're going to be setting up two scene files for our webcomic process. The first scene file I'm showing you guys how to create is for creating a panel. So each panel in your webcomic will be a separate scene. I just find it more better to do it this way than rather having one giant scene whereby you just add all your assets and everything, and obviously it's gonna pile up and it's gonna wear down on your PC. So what you want to do is create separate files for each panel, and then create another scene file for your structuring your panels as well as your text and layout of your webcomic. And I'll be taking you through both of these, and we're going to start off exactly as I said with the panel file. So how you would do this is, when starting up, immediately go to new scene, and I want you to click on 2D animation, because obviously we're going to be drawing in Blender. So you're going to be presented with this basic setup. So there's a few settings as well as a few layout things that I would do here with this file. And what you first want to do is change this to view. And what this does is, wherever you plan to draw will align with your view, rather than just having it on front, because if you draw it will only be in one axis, I think. So yeah, it will only appear on the front of your camera, and that's not exactly what we want, because we're going to be moving the camera around, especially if you want some perspective shots and you want your perspective to align with your drawings. So what I would change this to is view, and obviously the white canvas can burn your eyes out, so I suggest going over here and changing a few things over here. So how we would do that is we would go to the solid view first. Okay, we're in the solid view. You would go over here to this drop down and you see this viewport setting over here. This will be, because we mostly going to be working in the viewport, so this will just bring that down a bit to this like grayish. I would always recommend like kind of white but not too white, you know, so like around over here. Okay, and normally I don't draw with pressure sensitivity, so I would usually just turn all the pressure sensitivity off, and by default I don't know why the strength of the brush is set to 0.6. It should be set to 0.1 even when drawing with pressure sensitivity. That just makes everything much better. But of course, if you use pressure sensitivity, make sure this is on so that you can get that that tapered stroke. But normally I switch this off and I just draw with a non-tapered stroke. So that is that. Obviously, when it comes to naming your objects in your file, I would recommend trying to name everything, unless you just enjoy chaos and you love to see things burn to the ground. So what I would do is just name this to drawing, because this is your drawing or stroke object. And I wouldn't really, you don't have to put it into a collection, but I feel like it's neater if you would put it into collection. I don't think we need to change that for now, but always focus on naming things so that it doesn't confuse you. So what we do now is to create a workspace, and we're gonna pick the layout workspace. And what this will do is give you a better view of your 3D space, so you know exactly where you're drawing. So now that we're here in the 3D view, you can see this little origin point over here. This is the origin point for your drawings. So what I do is, and this is something you should do, especially if you're gonna mirror or make things symmetrical in a sense, I would add an empty object, and I will call this object mirror. So this is to mirror your drawings onto the object, and this is gonna come in handy, and you'll see when and why. So this camera, what I would do is I would parent the mirror object and a drawing object to the camera, and I'll show you exactly why I'm doing that. So we're gonna parent it to the camera so that it moves with the camera, the object, the empty object, and the stroke object, just so that follows the camera. And I'm gonna create, let me just create a plane, an empty plane, and let's add a cube somewhere, because depending on how you want to set up your scenes and whatever, you know. There we go. So now we have our camera, and also be aware that the auto frame option will be on, and just click that off. We don't want that auto frame option. It just creates frames as well as animates things automatically as you're moving them around, and we don't want that to happen. And I'll show you exactly why that is a problem. Because let's say I draw something. Okay, let me just make a little, so I'll make this little circle over here. Okay, I draw something. What's gonna happen is whenever you move over to off that keyframe, it's gonna disappear, and obviously it's gonna be annoying if you keep moving off things and it just disappears. So also I recommend, when drawing in Blender, staying on the exact keyframe things on. I always recommend setting this to 1 before you start your scene. Just setting it to 1 all the time, leaving it on 1, so that whenever you move around you can still see your object, but it's just for consistency issues. So keep that in mind as well. And don't worry, over time you'll kind of get used to Blender and get used to how things work in here, and that won't be an issue. Now I'm gonna head over here to this little tab. I have so much tabs over here you can't even see what's going on over there, so let's just drop the timeline. I'm gonna drop the timeline lower. So this tab over here is the object context menu. So select that and you go over here to camera to view, and what this will do is lock your camera to your view so that when you move, the camera moves with it. And obviously this is going to come in handy when you want to render things out. So you can also add this to your quick favorites menu, so that you can just turn it on and off whenever you want by hitting Q. And as you can see, I have a lot of favorites in here, and that's another quick tip. Don't forget to abuse that quick menu option, because it saves you so much time. Rather than going through all these channels, you can just pop into here by things you have favorited, and you know, just turn them on and off. So yeah, keep that in mind. So we have our drawing over here. Don't forget to always move your things in edit mode as well. That just keeps things centered, you know. So as you can see with grease pencil, the in front option is selected here on the side, and this just puts, even if my object is behind another object, it puts my grease pencil in front of those objects. Now of course, if you want maybe your object to be in front of your drawing, obviously you can turn it on and off. It's all up to you. It's all up to personal preference if you want it on or not. You might need it on for different scenes, you might need it off for different scenes, so keep that in mind. And obviously if you move your object out of place, don't worry, because the thing is, since you've parented to the camera, you hit Alt G and it will snap it back into place to the default parent position that you have set for it. So that also comes in handy, and that's why we parent our stuff to the camera. You can also parent it to an object, and that's a whole bunch of other advanced stuff that I'm not going to get into right now. This is just the basics. So I just want to show you exactly how the mirroring works. I actually just want to change the color for this, so that we can actually see exactly what's going on. So here we have a red object, and I'm going to add it to the front. And now what you're going to do is you can add now a mirror to this object. So this helps with symmetrical drawings. Obviously when you draw things, it's gonna have a mirror on it, and it's gonna be symmetrically, it's gonna mirror things onto this plane right here. I'll show you guys. So it takes the objects, the grease pencil objects rotation into account. So if you have set it up properly, you don't even need this object here in the back to actually set your mirror, because if it's set correctly, you don't need this over here. But this is just in case your object is kind of out of line. Maybe it's you know, some weird stuff is happening. So what you can do is, just to nail that down, you can actually set a mirror, so that this mirror will align with this object over here, this object's rotation, and you can see kind of the effect of that and how you can mess with that as well. But obviously, as I've said, if you set up your scene properly, you won't have to use this object over here to handle your mirroring, you know. But that's just a little hint for you guys, so you can help you out later in the future if you do have mirroring problems with your drawings and objects. Now, as you can see, our scene is basically set up, to be honest. What I would do is, these separate objects, I would just make a background collection, and I'll put them in there, because when you're drawing, obviously these things can get in the way of your drawings. So you can just turn it on and off, so you can focus more on drawing whatever you're drawing, you know, instead of just focusing on the background. And obviously the grid also helps with perspective, but you can obviously add 3D models in here if you ever have a problem with perspective for your characters and everything. There's plenty of free models out there with rigs and everything for Blender, so that's a plus as well. Also, there's a cool option here for foreshortening, and obviously we're gonna get into the render options soon enough. Our scene is basically set up. Just be sure when moving your camera, you at least have maybe be another viewport open so you can actually see exactly how the camera looks, you know, rather than just kind of guessing. It just helps with perspective for your drawings. Now we're gonna get into some of the render settings for your panels. If we go here to the side, normally the length and height of the camera can be changed over here, and obviously depending on what exactly you want for your panel length. And I'll show you exactly the different variations for your panel lengths that you can use here and how exactly it works by taking you through some examples of the panels I've done before. So obviously you got an idea of how I set up my panel scenes, and these scenes I would save as separate files as I've said before. These are just for panels. These are just to set up an entire scene for your panels. Each scene is a panel. Just keep that in mind. But obviously if you have a good setup for your panels and scenes, so far we have the bare bones minimum that you need for your scenes and shots. If you head down here to the strokes, this is your layer system over here. So it kind of works like the same in Photoshop, Clip Studio Paint. The layer on top will obviously be on top of the other layers, and it has its own opacity. You can even use masks. There's many things you can do over here and mess around with. I'm not going to really get into that. That's more advanced stuff, okay? That's basically it, because it's not animation, so it's just basically one frame you're focusing on, and that's all that. We also have our materials tab here, and I usually use materials for my drawings because it just makes things easy. You could use the vertex paint option, and if you ever wanted to do color corrections later on, it just presents a lot of problems. So I usually just stick to the materials tab over here. So just to put the final nail in the coffin for your paneling scenes, I want to show you exactly how I've set up my panel shots. So I'm gonna head here to my current comic, the City of Clones that I'm working on, and I'm gonna head to one of the latest scenes I've worked on. Also try to keep your files in check by naming things correctly. And here we go. So as you can see, a lot of dead bodies, a lot of dead people, but as you can see, this panel consists of one scene with a lot of different elements in it. Now you're probably asking, why all these different elements in this one shot? Like, you only see this front view. Now I want you to take into consideration that you may use this scene for many shots. So what I normally do is I save the shot as it is. Obviously we render it out, yada yada yada. You do what you gotta do. And as you can see I've changed the ratio a bit. I've turned the focal length down to 30 millimeters so that you can get this nice perspective, you know, from this point of view. You can see my resolution over here at which I'm rendering this one panel. Now with Webtoon specifically, as well as Tapas and many other webcomic posting platforms, usually the resolution of the page or the size of the page is 800 in width by 1200 in length as well. I times it by 2, so my render comes out as double the resolution I have over here. But the main thing I wanted to show you guys with this scene, when you set up one scene, especially if it's going to take place in the same area, what I normally do is I would save the scene as, like, save it as 1, right? So because that's the first panel of the first episode or whatever. Then when I'm done with the scene and I've rendered it out and everything, I would go to save as, and then I will hit this plus button right here and then save it out as 2. The same scene, save the scene as to the same scene, because it's a new scene but I'm using the same settings as the previous scene. I keep the consistency, and what I do is I just change things around, you know, and then I angle the camera to where I want the camera to be in the same shot. As you can see right there, the crease pencil object is obviously parented to my camera as I've set up and I've shown you before. I would normally just delete all the lines and strokes here because we won't need that for the next scene, because obviously it's been set differently. And then I would move the camera in a different position maybe, and I would choose the aspect ratio at which I want the panel to be, and then I'll draw in here and yada yada yada, and then save it over this panel over here where we currently set it as. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys. I'm not sure if I am making sense, but maybe it's giving you an idea of how I actually do these. So normally when I'm done with a panel, I will save the same panel as the next panel shot to keep the consistency. Then I would edit that panel to fit the needs of specifically what I need for that panel, save it over, and then save that file and then work in it. And then I would save that file as the next file as well, and then do the same thing all over and over again to keep the consistency of the same scene and same shot. So obviously when the scene changes to a new location, I would still save that scene, and then I would take out all the elements within it and then replace them with the elements I need. And if you've ever seen me work on stream, you would kind of get the gist of what I'm talking about. But hopefully I'm giving you an idea of how I set up these panels over here. And obviously if you have any questions concerning the way I set up my panels, or you think I've missed something, or you feel like I haven't explained much properly, I suggest you comment down below and let me know exactly what I missed or what exactly you want to know about this process. You can always join me on live stream as well. I answer every question on live stream, so it's very good to actually be live there, and work together through it. That being said, let's move on to the final scene, or the final file, where you're going to finalize everything and you're going to render out your full comic page. Now this is the final shot scene, and I'll show you with this one. As you can see, I've done all the paneling. Some of the materials. When it's purple, it means I've probably moved these files around. Okay, and I'll probably have to reopen all of them. Cool, that's very cool. Okay, so I only brought in 3 image files because I feel like it doesn't really matter, and also it saves me from giving spoilers to you guys if you haven't seen out the comic. So we're gonna work with this 3 panels over here. As you can see, there's many panels. Now I'm gonna show you how I've set this up. Now as you can see, my camera has this very long form, and as you can see, here's the resolution settings. Now you can set it to ×2 if you want. I just set it to 1 because the resolution has already been set with each panel, so I don't have to double it again and then compress it again because it's already been compressed. So how I did this is I set up exactly the same way I've set up my panel scene, but I'm going to show you exactly by starting. We're going to start again a new scene, okay, and I'll pop back to the scene just to demonstrate exactly how I got there. So obviously we're going to set this to view again. You set your scene to the settings that you feel will best suit you, but the main and important thing is the camera resolution for your renders. Now the problem with this is that I found in Blender is the camera can only stretch so long, so you can only reach, there's a certain limit to the resolution. So the highest resolution for the camera's length is, I think, 32,000 pixels, and that's the longest it can go. So what you're gonna have to do is, we have our main settings down, we have set it up exactly how we set up our panel scenes. The only difference is this long resolution that we have here for each panel that we're gonna lay down here. So this is gonna be our layout file for our entire webcomic. The scene that we have set up before this is only for each panel, and I have to just keep reminding you guys so I don't confuse you, because I'm not really the best at explaining things. So now how I would go about doing this is, we then go to as you can see, I'm using my favorites menu here, which I suggest you create one, and we're gonna hop into object mode first, then hit our favorites menu, hit to image as plain, and then we're gonna head to our file where we keep all our panels that we have rendered out, each panel obviously being each scene that we have set up. And I'm gonna grab one of these, and I'm gonna put it here. You can see how big the resolution is. So I've rendered this panel out with double the resolution, and now obviously if you go to render, you're gonna see some issues here, especially depending on the backdrop. If you render with a white gutter space or a dark gutter space. Now obviously I render with a dark gutter space, and this is a problem I ran into because the panel, this panel over here, is obviously going to be reacting to the light around it. Now as you can see here, if it goes to black, you know, you're not going to see anything. Now the best way to get around this for each panel is to head in here, head to your shader tab, your shader editor, and delete the principal BSDF, because that's kind of configuring all the light in the scene and kind of pushing it through nodes and stuff like that, and it's a way of kind of giving information to that image of the lighting and everything. So we're going to take all of it out, and all we want is the image. We just want Blender to read the image. No effects on it, no nothing. Okay, that's all we need, and we're gonna set it up, and we're gonna line up our panel with the resolution that we have here. You can see the camera's lines, and we're gonna line it up exactly with that camera. And obviously the more we're gonna add more panels to here when we bring them in, and obviously we can rearrange the panels, the length and everything. We can rearrange it all in here, and this is exactly how I set up my panels. But you can also draw in this file as well, but I usually only draw in this file for thumbnailing and planning, and then I kind of finish it off with setting up the panels the way I set them up here, just showing you guys exactly how I set them up. And make sure your principal BSDF is nowhere in sight, only the image giving information to your output material node right here, so that you don't run into any complications with the light. I want to show you one of my latest files that I've set up for this. So this is basically, this is the main setup for your layouts scene for all your panels, and the way you're going to set up your entire webcomic with all the panels and all the text and speech bubbles, which is another issue that I have to explain to you guys, because the text and speech bubble editing in Blender, it's a whole other mission and a whole other journey to figure out. All I've done is, and let's go into the 3D view. As you can see, the speech bubble is in front of the panels, and the speech bubble is just a mesh. It's just a mesh that I 3D modeled, just a mesh plane that I 3D modeled in a specific shape. And obviously, if you like my paneling style has become more rigid and more like shapely, but that's just a style that I'm trying to perfect. Obviously, if you want to go more traditional, you can add a subdivision surface modifier to this, and then add maybe a bunch of creases to the side of it, and maybe around here. So now it's a bit more smoother, but this is like a whole thing that you guys probably don't understand. For some of you who haven't used Blender a lot, or it's gonna be way too tedious to actually make these speech bubbles in Blender. But you know, if you want to do it, you can do it. As you can see, the text has also been made in Blender. I've typed it out here, incident, blah blah blah. So you see, I can, these are separate objects. I just overlaid the text onto the plane in the back, and that's how I did that. And now when it comes to special effects, I can see the special effects text over here. This is planes with obviously materials on it and everything, and all emission materials and all types of things I did around here. I just 3D modeled this basically. And that's how I got that done. And this is just giving you some insight of and how I actually like solve these problems that you will definitely get if you're planning to do your webcomics in Blender. Especially, as you can see, my image files have just disappeared because I've moved my files to a different folder, and I kind of have to reset this again. But the most problematic thing that I've found with this method is obviously the setup and how exactly you go about setting up Blender for webcomics, because it's not really made for webcomics, it's made for animation. So there's a lot of things I kind of have to shift and move around to actually fit exactly the goal that I'm trying to meet here. So there's many other things that I feel like I've missed, or there's specific things that I may not have touched on, but there's so much stuff with this method that I'm still trying to figure out. So once I've finished up my City of Clones comic, I will be doing a full walkthrough of my entire process for that comic. So you guys just have to bear with me and be patient. That should come out after February or within February, taking you through every little bit of thing that I went through with the comic, everything that I've dealt with. And definitely, since the improvements to Blender, we have Blender 3.0 now, there's definitely new methods and new techniques that I would like to actually try out, and new things that I would like to implement to not only make things much more easier for us, but as well to improve the quality, as well as the output speed of the panels, as well as the output speed of our webcomic, and how exactly we can make things more better and efficient for all of us, so we can work on it, as well as just making it fun for everyone, because that's exactly what you want to do when working on your passion and something that you love. You want to make it fun, you want to make it exciting, you want to make it interesting. Okay, so that's what I'm planning to do. Hopefully you guys can stick around for the next video that I'm planning on doing. Hopefully this kind of gave you an idea of how you can go about doing these things. This, as I've said, is just the bare bones basics. This is just the setup, just going to basic things that I've figured out as I went along with the process, and hopefully there's something that maybe caught your eye, or something that you picked up on, and maybe you thought of a better way or a different way of doing these things. I always enjoy people sharing their experiences and their methods to help improve my work as well. So I suggest you go into the comment section, let me know what you think of this, and anything that you can maybe add to this process that may maybe help me out, or maybe you figured out something that I haven't figured out, I haven't seen yet. If you haven't seen my previous webcomic, The Merchant of Ignitus, all purely made in Photoshop, of course, no Blender there, but that's all purely made in Photoshop. If you just enjoy action and people beating each other up, as well as a very interesting lore and storyline, I suggest you check out that webcomic. All the links will be in the description down below, and stay tuned for the City of Clones coming this February. So yeah, looking forward to putting that out for you guys, as well as putting out the full walkthrough, and I will be doing more advanced tutorials on my Patreon when I can. So support me on Patreon if you guys want to, of course. I'm planning to be a bit more active on my Patreon, so you will get brand new videos on there as soon as they come out. You will get early access to my webcomics. There's many other things, as well as I will be giving 50% of the Patreon goals away to any lucky winner, which I will randomly select from not only my Patreon. I am adding some of my newer subscribers to the list, so that those who subscribe to my channel and comment on my videos, you guys can also stand a chance to win some of that cash over there. And this is just to support all those artists out there who can't really afford equipment, and they want to get around as well. They want to do some awesome stuff, but they just really don't have the opportunity to, and this is to help them out as well. Thank you guys for watching. This is again your second reminder to hit that like button, subscribe, and check out some of the other things that I have going on, as well as my other projects. And don't forget to stay awesome, everyone. Bye bye now.